This is a messed up story with so many details that I'm not sure how to structure it, but I'll do my best. I'll probably forget to add some parts. I'll divide it into chapters or parts so it'll be easier to navigate through. I used to live in Stockholm, Sweden. There, I attended high school and met my then boyfriend, Jack. He'll come into play later. I was very active on social media then. I had Gifyo back when that was a thing. I used the GIFs to link to my blog, show makeup, hairstyles, etc. For those who don't know what Gifyo was, it was basically Instagram, but only with GIFs. Back in the day, I had a pretty large following on that site, but the site had its downsides, particularly the nasty, sexual messages you could get quite often. Part 1. The meeting. Then this person, Robin, started following me and was so nice and friendly. It felt genuinely like Robin wished me all the best and made me happy whenever he or she would write. Robin said that he or she was a male, 23 at the time, and was from the US, but that he had Swedish relatives. I thought it was pretty dope, and we would chat a few times a month in English. I also loved to sing. I uploaded covers to YouTube. Robin would be so excited when I released new covers and compliment me, and I'd feel great. It was so nice to have an online friend who seemed truly happy for me. Though this behavior started to become too much sometimes, it started to feel wrong. Part 2. The Flags. Robin then sent me a drawing. He said it was a portrait of me. It was a girl with animal ears making a cute pose with her hand, piercing green eyes and whiskers. He said it's to look like me, but mixed with a cat, my favorite animal. I was beyond impressed. It was so cute, and I was flattered that someone would draw me. But that excitement turned to ash in my mouth one night. This is where it all started for real, where the flag should have gone up. I play League of Legends, and one of my favorite champions back then was Ahri, especially in her Foxfire Ahri skin. I was scrolling through Safari on my phone to find a wallpaper for her to have on my phone, and then I see the picture, the fan art that Robin made, only that the eyes are now yellow, like Ahri's. I clicked the picture, and it linked me to a DeviantArt account. The caption was something like, "Casual cute Foxfire Ahri, posted 3 years ago." I wrote to Robin and told him how upset I was that he stole a drawing from an artist, edited the colors a bit, and claimed to have worked hard making it himself. I explained to him how awful it was to take someone else's work, and then say that you made it yourself. He said he was ashamed and was sorry, and said he only wanted to impress me and make me smile. I couldn't stay mad at him for long, but I was wary now. It had been a while since I'd posted a cover, and Robin made sure as hell I knew it had been a while. He would nag and plead with me to make another one, to the point that I told him to back the flippin' burgers off. I posted a cover a few weeks later. Part 3. Too Close for Comfort. I broke up with Jack, the boyfriend. We went our different ways, and it was okay. Robin, on the other hand, was not. He couldn't, for the sake of humanity, grasp why we had broken up, and pleaded yet again, but this time it was a pleading for me to get back together with my boyfriend. I tolerated this at first, because to most people we seemed perfectly happy together, Jack and I. I got really upset with him, because after a few days on end, he would ask if we were getting back together, and I just explained that Jack was unfaithful, seeing other girls, flirting with them. The response was, "Oh, but you can't forgive him? Not getting back?" I was done. I told him to leave me alone, and he did. Part 4. Found out. I was just like last time, scrolling on the internet, and thought one night I wanted to listen to others doing the same cover that I did. I started scrolling through the list and see my face on the thumbnail with the caption, "Song name, cover by me." This was not my video, not my YouTube account. My heart froze. I felt myself grow cold. I clicked, and my audio started playing. It was my voice, my picture, but not my name. I clicked the profile, and the coldness intensified. Every cover of me, every video of me from my own YouTube, Instagram, friends' YouTubes, Jack's YouTube, and SoundCloud was on there. The videos dated back 2 whole years. The account said that her name was Jenny, and that she was the one singing, producing the music, hell, even going as far as taking videos from my relatives and saying that it was her family. I was confused, scared, angry. Who would do this? I got my answer with the most twisted thing I've ever experienced online. In the comments to the video were comments from Robin's account. Robin, thanks so much, Jenny, for dedicating this song to me. Jenny, oh, no bother, Robin. I made it all for you. It was like the stalker was either two stalkers, or this person had made up two characters and was talking to him or herself through the comments. This freaked me out big time. I wrote to all my friends whose content was stolen, wrote to my ex and my new boyfriend, now fiancé, and told them to help me shut this thing down. The account was shut down within 20 hours. I blocked all accounts linked to Robin, including the Jenny accounts. I locked all social medias. I had all social medias removed, everyone I didn't know IRL. I Google image reversed all my profile pictures, and nothing came up. I was paranoid for about a year after this. I didn't trust anyone I didn't know IRL. Part 5. The Aftermath. Robin made new accounts to follow me, which I blocked. I have an official Instagram for work and such, which he or she could be looking at, but it's something I've now accepted will happen, and I shouldn't live with internet fear because of one person. Just 1 month ago, I logged into Tumblr because I wanted to see if I had some juicy memes stashed there somewhere. Yeah, I know, cringe. I then saw blocked accounts. Only one was blocked. Guess who? Robin had changed the Tumblr blog from his or her Robin fakery to something new, something personal. The blog was filled with angst just like all other Tumblrs, but this one was filled with self-hatred posts, extremism, racism, and long posts written in Swedish. This was the first time it hit me. This person was Swedish. I told my best friend to go through the blog, to see if her FBI skills could sniff something out, and she did. I'll combine all evidence that her and I combined so far. Part 6. Conclusion. The stalker was probably born 1989, and he or she lives in the same part of the city as my parents, where I lived before. Gender is unknown, seems to depend. The stalker couldn't go to high school with me, but must have known me through something else, mutual friends or something. He or she stole my content for years, pretending to be friends to get more content, and probably still checking in on me. My best guess is that it was a girl who wanted to be me, have my life and my boyfriend. When I stopped creating new content and broke up with Jack, her whole made-up world started to fall apart. If Robin somehow reads this, I hope you'll find acceptance and happiness in yourself, because it is no life living it through someone else. Go in peace. I have, to this day, still no clue who Robin is. I was 14 years old when I had to live with my grandparents. I had to live with them because my sister was in college and my parents were divorced. They lived in this old bungalow-type house. It was one story, and we have stairs that immediately goes into the attic. An attic which no one really uses. We just put stuff in there. It's too hot and stuffy up there. The sole window up there didn't really help. The attic had old, creaky wooden floors that I remember I'd have to polish with a coconut shell, because that's how we do it here in the Philippines. That, and my grandparents are very traditional. Anyways, my room door was near the stairs leading to the attic. Like, you open my door and then face right, and the stairs would immediately be right there. I hated that every time I left my room, because I would expect that something would immediately crawl down from the attic. One night, my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport, but because of the hellish traffic here, they had to leave at 7 p.m., and their expected arrival back home would be at almost 5 a.m. So, a 14-year-old girl would be home alone that whole time. I told them I'd be safe here. We live in a gated community, we have tons of guard dogs, everything would be okay, or so I thought. Before they left, we'd already had dinner, so I was stuck with cleaning the dishes and all. As I was doing that, I could hear a bunch of neighboring dogs bark a lot. I didn't really think much of it, because the dogs always do that. But when I finished cleaning up from dinner, I immediately had to lock every door and window and close all the lights before heading to bed. When I entered my room, the lights were open and it looked normal. My anime posters were on the wall, my closet was untouched. My bed was next to my barred, tinted windows. We had to tint them, because I was on the first floor, and my grandparents wanted to make sure no one would peep in on a young girl's room. They were barred too, because my uncle, who used to use the room, always escaped through there for parties. This was my grandparents' solution to that. Nothing was out of place to alarm me. Everything was normal until I turned off the lights. As soon as I turned my lights off, a silhouette of a man was illuminated by the streetlight outside. He looked like he had thick, curly hair and a skinny build. I thought I was having a hallucination, so I turned the lights on again, and he was gone. So I turned it off, and he was back again. Turn them on? He was gone. Turn them off? He was gone. I sighed in relief. I had just tricked myself, I guess, or something else was casting the shadow. I double-locked my door just to be safe, one with the doorknob lock and one of those door latch type locks, then tucked myself in. It was hard to fall asleep when a lot of dogs were barking outside. They weren't our dogs, it was our neighbors. But I was finally falling asleep when I heard something from above me moving. Something in the attic. I pushed down the thought, I'm tricking myself again. I hugged my pillow. It's just rats, I said to myself. These rats seemed heavy, and were also pushing furniture around. My heart sank when I heard them hurriedly go down the stairs and stop at the bottom. I covered myself with my blanket and waited for something. I was also wishing that my parents had given me a phone at a time like this, but I only waited with bated breath. Suddenly I heard my doorknob being gently fiddled with. I wanted to vomit when I heard a click, followed by a quiet turn of the knob. The knob turned, but it didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. This time, I had finally managed to stand up, shaking. I was a kid, home alone with no phone, no means of defense. All it was that was saving me was the thick door from the olden days. I softly pushed my body up against the door and locked everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want him to know I was there. I didn't know why he stopped, but he did. I didn't go back to my bed. I just sat there at the door, waiting. It felt like forever. I heard footsteps go back up the stairs, but still I sat there. I saw something move in the corner of my eye. There, out the window. The shadow was back. I forced myself not to look. All I could think of was, thank God the windows were barred. I don't remember what happened after that. I think I fell asleep, or I was too scared to even think straight. I just remember the next day, when my family and I were finally having breakfast. I casually brought it up. Grandfather, I think I heard footsteps in the attic last night. My grandmother scoffed. It was probably rats. I never brought it up again. I didn't want them to worry. I probably was. But I do know this. Our dogs were caged near the gate and were far from my room, so they wouldn't have seen anything. The only dogs that were near my room were the neighbors. Also, there was nothing outside my window that could cast a shadow that looked like a man. And lastly, the attic window was open. So this happened when I was much younger. I want to say freshman in high school, probably like 2008. There used to be this road near where I lived in California called Croak Road. It was barely a road. No one traveled on it, and it was surrounded by small patches of forest and some abandoned barns and houses. I would typically go there with my friends to skateboard and hang out. This one night, I was hanging out with two of my friends, Lucas and Dorian, and someone wanted to go to Croak Road to hang out, since it was creepy at night. It might sound lame, but we loved exploring like a bunch of fifth graders, and weren't really into smoking or anything, so what else was there to do? I asked my 20-year-old brother James if he could drive us down to one of the nature reserves by the road. This specific reserve was larger than the others, and had a network of gravel paths leading through it. Basically, we were looking for unexplored territory to hike in. Soon, one particular path we were traveling down had become so narrow that James' Ford Explorer couldn't pass through it. So we got out and walked for a while, chatting and just having fun. We walked through the woods for about a half hour, until it had gotten relatively dark and the sun was gone, at which point we turned around to head back to the car. It's now that I should mention that despite being near a lot of subdevelopments, this patch of forest was huge, I'd say about 1,000 acres, and rarely visited since it was easy to get lost in, especially at night. It was a challenge getting the car turned around, but James managed it, and we were off down the road. Dorian proposed we turn down a different path we had passed by earlier, since we had about 40 minutes until our parents wanted us back, and we agreed. Down this path was a tiny pond Dorian wanted to check out to take pictures of, since he hadn't got the opportunity to visit at night. It was slow going since the road was even crabbier than the main one we were traveling on that turned off Croak Road. Minutes later, we got into a slight argument. Dorian was convinced James had taken a wrong turn since we should have arrived at the pond by now, while James claimed that he had been driving straight the whole time. It was dark after all. Eventually, we came to a fork in the road that none of us were familiar with. None of us knew which way to go, so we ended up guessing and going left, hoping that both directions would ultimately lead back to the main path. None of us were scared or anything. In fact, we were actually excited and intrigued. Driving through seemingly the middle of nowhere at night. It was at this point that we rounded a small bend in the road, and the headlights fell upon a surreal sight. There were 4 figures emerging from the forest and crossing the road, wearing what looked to be long cloaks with the hoods up and holding flashlights. One guy at the back of the group was dragging a large duffel bag, a human-sized duffel bag. We all froze and stopped mid-conversation, and as soon as our high beams landed on the 4 figures, they froze as well. James pulled to the left and went around them. Driving past them felt like an eternity because we couldn't have been going over 5 miles an hour due to the poor condition of the road. Sitting in the passenger seat, I could see them inches beyond my window, and they were indeed wearing black robes and holding flashlights. I didn't get a good look at the bag, but judging by the way the guy was holding it, something heavy was inside. None of us said a word until the road straightened out and we were far past the guys. At which point, James just muttered, "What the hell was that?" We continued down the road in silence until I heard Lucas say, "Holy shit," and repeat himself in a louder, more panicked voice. He said, "They're coming back." I twisted around in my chair to see Lucas pointing out the back window. I could barely see anything, but about 100 yards away we saw the beams of 4 flashlights shaking erratically. The guys were, without a doubt, running after us. All of us screamed at James to floor it, and he sped down the road. The car was bouncing and shaking uncontrollably as we flew over potholes. I kept my eyes on the flashlight beams until we rounded another bend in the road and they were out of sight. Thankfully, the path did manage to take us back to the main path. James gunned it down the path until we popped off by Croak Road and got the hell out of there. The weirdest thing about it was, there couldn't have been a vehicle anywhere near those guys for 50 miles in either direction. We would have seen one if there had been. We'd explored most of the area before, and there wasn't anywhere to pull off the road and park. We didn't say anything more until we were back at my place. We talked about it for a bit, and then my friends went home and James and I went to bed. I didn't know if we should call the cops or not, but James, who I'd guess would have been the adult in the situation, seemed reluctant, so I dropped it. I never told my parents until just before writing this, and they kinda scolded me for not telling them, and that we should have contacted the authorities just to report suspicious people in the preserve. I still wish to know how the hell they got there, where they were going, and what the hell was in the bag. This happened 2 summers ago, while I was house-sitting out in California for an older couple I had met at a conference for work. It had seemed like a dream scenario. The couple wanted to vacation in Hawaii for 2 weeks, but didn't want to board their cats. And I had been chatting with them about wanting to visit California again, where they happened to live, because I had loved it the first time I went, and we figured that we could mutually benefit if I came out and house-sat for them. So I flew out there, and they showed me around for a few days. Taught me how to take care of the cats, 2 of them, one was extremely shy and I barely saw, which is important later, and their plants. Gave me access to their house and cars. These people were so generous, and before I knew it, I had dropped them off at the airport and was on my own. At first it really was the dream vacation. I was staying in Oakland, making forays into San Fran, Sonoma, Monterey. In the mornings, I could walk out the front door and shortly be hiking the paths surrounding nearby Mount Diablo, and I was just ultra content with the world. I was so enamored by the area that I had actually started looking into taking some steps to relocate out there even. But then one day, about halfway through my final week there, when I got back to the house, I felt really odd. Almost like I shouldn't go inside. I shook it off and went inside anyway, because it was getting late and I needed to put out dinner for the cats. Once I was inside, I forced myself to ignore how off I felt, and made some food for myself, went to bed, and was shocked to find the shy cat hiding under my bed and crying. This was the first time I'd even seen her up close. The entire time I had been there, up to this point, she never left my host's bedroom unless she didn't realize I was around. Again, I ignored feeling weird and just assumed she had decided I was okay and went to bed. I did start locking my bedroom door that night, though. I also remember that about halfway through that night, I thought I heard someone walking around in the gravel outside of my window. But after listening for a bit, I didn't hear anything else and went back to sleep. The day after, in the morning, I still felt a little odd, but kept up with my plans for the day. I drove out to a little music festival in Sonoma and went clothes shopping and had an overall great day. When I got back to the house, though, I found the front door locked in a way I hadn't left it. Basically, my host never locked the deadbolt, only the lower second lock, and that's the only lock my key worked on, so I never messed with the deadbolt. But it was definitely locked. So I had to call my hosts and find the hide-a key, which, to their credit safety-wise, was buried like a whole foot underneath a bush outside, and had definitely not been unearthed for a long time. So I used that, went inside, and kept the key with me just in case it happened again. And it did, but with a different door. This time, I had stepped out into the garage to get a drink, and when I turned around to go back into the house, the door was shut and locked. I could use my normal key on that door, but I was still pretty bewildered. My own cats were whack, so I think in my mind I was trying to come up with a way that the cats could be locking me out of the house. But I was coming up empty. I decided I must have misunderstood how the locks worked, and just wrote it off and started checking and triple-checking the locks when I went out of the house, or out into the garage. That night, when I went to bed, the really awful feeling of unease was still there. And so was the shy cat, who was clearly unhappy to see me, but also wouldn't leave my room. But again, I just locked my bedroom door and went to sleep. The next morning I felt awful. Nausea, body aches. I had no desire to leave the house, so I decided to stay in and Netflix for a day. The vacation stay was like a full 2 weeks, so I didn't feel like I was in any hurry to get all of my touristy things done anyway. But as the day went on, I started to feel that feeling of wrongness again, and it morphed into feeling incredibly watched. Around mid-afternoon, it got to the point that I was so uneasy that even feeling awful, I decided to go out of the house for a bit to shake it off. I was getting a bit low on food, so I went to the grocery store and bought a couple of food items that I didn't think would hurt my stomach. And as I started to leave the checkout, the cashier said the generic, "Have a great evening," and I just instantly started crying, shocking myself and the poor cashier, because I just had this intrusive thought that said, "You might be the last person to ever say that to me." When I got to my car, I was still crying, and my entire body was telling me not to drive back to the house. I couldn't not, though, because I didn't want to neglect the cats, so I drove back, parked in the driveway, and convinced myself after about a half hour to just go and open the front door. Once I did that, I thought I would get over it, and maybe be able to go in and at least feed the cats, and then maybe I'd get a hotel room after. But my body physically would not let me inside. It was like I was stuck in the entryway. I then made a deal with myself. I would yell into the house saying I had already called the police and that they were on their way. In panic logic, I figured that would make anyone in the house leave, so I faced the inside of the house, looking down the hallway towards the bedrooms, and I did just that. The second I had finished saying, "They're almost here, so if you want to avoid getting arrested, you need to leave now," the light in my host's room turned on and I heard some banging. I immediately hightailed it back to the car and called the police for real, and proceeded to have a mental breakdown while talking to the dispatcher. Once they got there, they checked the house and didn't find anyone, but the double doors in my host's bedroom were left wide open. I'm so glad the cats didn't get out. And there was a pile of food wrappers in the corner behind the blinds, so they said it looked like someone had been there. What makes it so scary to me is that nothing was taken, and that, based on the shape of the house, that would have been the perfect vantage point to see me in the living room, as I stayed home sick. To explain this, the house was in an L shape, and from the windows into the garden that were in the host bedroom, you could see into the living room windows. Also, the minute the police were gone, they said they couldn't prove anyone was there. There was no signs of forced entry, and we couldn't get a hold of my host immediately to verify if anything had been taken. Which, once they were back, they verified that nothing had been taken, so they said they'd patrol a bit, but nothing else. The shy cat was right back in my host bedroom, and I didn't see her again until I left to go back home. So basically, I think the intruder had been there at least 2 days, forcing her to choose between two strangers, and leading her to choose the one that was at least a little less strange. It messed me up pretty bad, especially because they didn't catch the person, and didn't seem to have any desire to look, and I still had to stay in that house for the next 3 days. Nothing else odd happened, and I didn't feel anything off the rest of the time I was there, but the damage was done. I've never felt completely safe in a home without doing a complete search before bed since. But I'm extremely glad my gut spoke up. I guess I'd rather have some residual anxiety than be dead. So whoever was in my host's house watching me, let's please never meet.